It's time to unleash the expert. What is he an expert on? Relationships, sex, spirituality, and rediscovering yourself beyond the trauma. Get ready to unleash more purpose, passion, and pleasure in your life. Here's the expert himself, Mr. Brannon Patrick.
Brannon, how's it going, man?
It's going good. We're doing something a little different today.
Yeah.
So this episode is an episode going out on several different platforms, right?
That's right. So if you're listening here at Real Talk Recovery, you're going to get basically the same normal kind of an episode that you would normally get, but it's also going to go to the Wandering Therapist sessions, which is we're going to break some of this up and probably share it on some my platform called the Wandering Therapist sessions, and then also Brannon.
Well, I before I get to the Brannon Patrick show, I just want to say the Wandering Therapist is really cool. It's Tyler out in the middle of nowhere, usually with his dog running around in the background.
Kind of chaotic.
But what I normally see are like reels or little excerpts of stories that are really powerful and impactful, and then go viral, and he gets all kinds of comments from people, which is great. So. And they find you, where do they find the Wandering Therapist?
The Wandering Therapist sessions, if you're looking for it on Spotify or on YouTube.
Nice. Yeah. And then this is also going out to the Brannon Patrick show. So that's my new show. That's just me, a bit more raw, and just, we're not talking about sex addiction, betrayal, trauma all the time. It's more broad. We talk about deep trauma. We talk about plant medicine quite a bit, spirituality, things like that. So
it's like all of your kind of really like deep to your core kind of like concepts that are really hitting home for you right now. You spend a lot of time on your podcast with other guests as well.
Yeah, I bring on guests, interesting guests. The mom asked me, like, what are you trying to do there? You know? And I said, I'm just trying to be raw and real and talk about the things that I love to talk about, and kind of unapologetically talk about those things. So yeah, you can find that at the Brannon Patrick show. It's on iTunes, and it's also on YouTube. You can find the Brannon Patrick show, so check it out.
And you're giving me a little bit of a hard time about being all over the place on all the different platforms, but I swear, Brannon, I think I see a video clip of you somewhere on some platform pretty much every day. So, yeah. So you're pretty much everywhere too.
Yeah, well, I learned from my older brother. So I don't know where you find these marketing and these tech guys, but man, you're just all over the place.
I got a secret weapon called Chase. So anyway,
that's true. That's true. All right. So the topic today is actually an interesting topic, and it's I think a very, very important topic. And it can fly over the head of some people. So I hope that we can break it down and talk about it in a way where people really understand it. Do you remember that picture of that? It's like, if you look at it one way, it's a young lady who's kind of in a dress and looking backwards and turned around. And then if you look at it in a completely, and it's really just, you're looking at the exact same thing, you're just thinking about it differently. And it looks like an old hag, like an old lady, just beat up old lady, like a big face of an old lady, right?
Yes.
Why do some people see the young woman and some people see the old woman?
Yeah, it's just a matter of what parts of the picture they are drawn to and what parts they attend to that formulates then the perspective that they see it from. And sometimes it takes a while to actually see that there's two, right?
But then when you do see that there's two, it's hard to unsee the other way, right? Like once you can make that shift in your head, it's like, oh, I can now see the old lady, or I can now see the young lady. But until you see it the other way, it's really hard to see it.
Yeah. In fact, you kind of feel crazy. You could be in the same room with a bunch of other people saying, "Oh, I see that. All I see is the young lady," and you're like, "No, all I see is the old lady." And you almost feel like you're being gaslit for a minute until something finally clicks and you're like, "Oh, I see it now." Right.
And then you see it and you're like, "Oh my gosh, how did I not see that before?" Have you seen that Black in and blue dress, or the gold and white dress. Have you seen that one?
I've seen that image. Yes.
So what color is it?
It's gold.
Oh my gosh. I knew you'd say that.
Why?
That is black and
totally
blue.
true. It is.
That is as black and
gold.
blue as it gets. Like, I have a hard time seeing like how people see the gold on that one.
It's so
like,
funny.
What are you talking about? Gold. But look, we're brothers. We've had similar life experiences. You see one color and I see another.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
It's interesting. I'm thinking, Brannon, like, I remember this. You said this one time at one of the retreats that we put on. I was telling a story, and I told this story of like my best day ever was in high school, and it was in the state championship of the soccer state championship. And I ended up like kind of being responsible for the game.
You always find a way to get this story in.
I know. I got to make sure I rub it in a little bit more. But then I was like, kind of like carried off the field, just like, it's almost like watching Rudy, but a soccer version of it, Yeah. And I'm sitting there telling the story, going like, yeah, that was one of my finest days, like one of my finest memories. And I heard you say that was one of the worst days of my life.
Yeah. Because I was a jealous brother.
well, because there was like, and this is like getting right back down to kind of where you're going, Brannon. We did grow up as brothers. We experienced much of the same thing, and yet we both saw the world from such a different perspective in so many ways, in our life experiences, in the way that we were raised, even in that like memory that I'm sharing right now. I was like, oh, that was one of my finest moments. And you were like, oh my gosh, that was one more evidence of me not being good enough, because Tyler was good and I wasn't. And, but it was the exact same. It was the same experience, right?
Yeah.
Just two different lenses to view it from.
Yeah. I got one more example. Then let's dig in why this happens. Have you ever, met with a client and you just love the client, and they're just a good-hearted, wonderful person. And you just like working with them. You got some good counter transfers going on that you got to be careful of. But and then you meet with their spouse, and they're just like talk about what horrible people they are and how they're the worst and how they are just terrible. Yeah, have you had that experience
that happens
ever?
Frequently.
How is it that you can just like feel the love for this person and see their good heart and all these things, and their spouse has such a different vantage point?
Yeah, well, I think it's, and maybe this is something that you could even ask my wife in our recovery. People always coming up and saying, Tyler is so amazing. He's so incredible. Like, da, 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 da. And she's like, you don't know what he's done. You don't know all that.
He's a piece of shit. No.
You want me to tell you the real story of what my experience is with Tyler? Because that's not what I've experienced. Right. And so, so I think, that happens all the time. And what's interesting about that, Brannon, is that it's not like there's a right or wrong here. It's not like you're seeing it right and the spouse is seeing it wrong. It's that there is legitimately a different experience with the same person that has also been interpreted in different ways because of whatever goes on there.
Yeah.
Past history and the way that I view myself, the world, relationships, and also what's gone on with my actual experience.
Well, so here's the question I have for you. What is true?
What's true?
Yeah, what's the truth? If one person sees it black and the other person sees it white, what is true?
Well, I think the human thing is that we see it, the way that we see it has to be true.
Okay, so that's a great... Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, the way that we see it has to be true because that's the default setting. And because we experience something, we assume that it is true, and then everything else is under question. When in reality, like we used to drive this, in fact, mom and dad's car that they gave to you, that we think you gave to us eventually, that now is being driven by somebody else. I call it the purple car because it's purple, but my family says I'm crazy because it's blue. I've never paused to stop and question whether or not it was blue because it's just purple.
You're crazy if you think that's purple.
Well, but I would then turn around and think you're crazy because you think it's blue. And
so, but what is true?
And
what is actually true?
The well, when we're talking about the car, it's purple.
No, what is actually true? So I can see it as blue. You can see it as purple. But what is actually true? Here's the thing, Tyler. We might get a little deep here, but I think if you can understand this principle, there's immense opportunity here for deep healing and power and manifesting what you want in your life. Is if I'm able to choose how I see things, if I'm able to shift my perspective, then I'm able to change the way I'm responding and reacting to things in my life. For example, let's take your heroic soccer thing, right?
Yeah.
As a 16-year-old boy, the lens that I'm looking through is, I definitely am not Tyler, so therefore I'm not okay, right? Mom and dad are proud of Tyler, and they don't even hardly know I'm alive, so I'm not okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the lens I'm looking through. So as you're doing this flying header to win the state championship, my perspective and my lens is, yeah, look, what does this say about me? Okay. Now, if Tyler scores the winning goal, I love just hammering on this and bringing this up again and again. If Tyler scores the winning goal, what does that say about me? And how do I interpret that? I can shift my perspective here. I could go from that freaking sucks and I'm a loser to that is amazing. Like my freaking brother, who I'm like a lot, he's a champion. And he's a champion, and I'm his brother. This is awesome. Right? So if I'm a loser because Tyler's a winner, I can challenge that and I can say, is that true? Is that actually true?
It doesn't need to be true.
I could change that and I could say that's not what else would I like to think or believe that could shift the way that I'm responding in this moment. Right? I can take deep trauma and I can say mom and dad abandoned me. They hurt me. And I could give you all the evidence that mom and dad abandoned me. They did this, they did that, they did this, they did that. And I could go out into the world and I could do drugs and get addicted to all kinds of things because I am trying to find that love that I never found from mom and dad. Or I could change my perspective some. And I know this might be hard to hear for some people. I could change my perspective some. Maybe mom and dad didn't abandon me.
Yeah.
Maybe something else happened. Something that I'm not aware of.
Yeah. Maybe I interpreted it in a certain way and it's just one way. And I could have interpreted it 10 different ways too, that all would have fallen under the category of being actually true.
Yes. You know who doesn't want to hear this, Tyler? That we all have the opportunity to do this? The people that want to stay stuck in a victim stance and don't want to be empowered to create what they want in their life.
Yeah.
Right? Because they don't want to be accountable for what outcomes they get in their life. They want to sit back and blame. It was mom and dad's fault. It's Tyler's fault for scoring that goal. He proved what a loser I am. You know, that's lame trauma that I'm talking about.
Yeah, right.
But the point is the people that don't want to step into their power to shift their perspective, they're the ones that want to stay validated in their victimhood. Right?
Yeah, I think the challenge to that, Brannon, is that a lot of times we don't even realize that we're the ones who've kind of set the parameters of our own prison cell because we don't even stop to question whether or not it could be something different. So like using that example, oh, I suck because my brother did this. Most people just find more proof of why they continue to suck instead of going, why do I believe that? And does that belief actually have to be true?
Well,
right?
Tyler, it comes back to the picture of the woman, right? It's like, it's so hard to see the old woman if I've never seen her.
Yeah.
It's so hard for you to see that car as blue if like you've never seen it as blue.
Yeah.
And so, and it's the same with our shame. It's the same with our trauma. It's so hard to even be open to the possibility of something different if it's always just been that way, right? That's what you're saying.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying like it sometimes takes like a true shift, whether that's emotionally or mentally. Usually it happens for me in both ways, where it's like, it's kind of like that. If you watch the movie The Sixth Sense, you know, everyone's seen that, where finally at the end it all comes to fruition. You're like, oh, like there it is. Like it all comes around a whole different perspective, and then you can go back and look through the movie and see how it was obvious the whole time, but you never saw it. Right. The same thing is true where I have this happen a lot with like EMDR sessions with my clients. It's also happened for me with my own EMDR sessions, where I go in seeing it from one angle, and by the time I'm done, I'm walking out going like, whoa,
paradigm
like,
shift.
I'm thinking of like a memory of like when I was a child, like it was so traumatizing for me in the way that I had been viewing it. And I was like, man, I was a failure. I let everyone down. I let my brothers down. I let my parents down. I let all this down. And by the time I'm done walking out of that session, I'm like, dude, I was the hero of that story.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was awesome. Like,
Mm-hmm.
holy cow. And I not only think it, but I feel it. And it's like, that was there for my whole life. That could have been true.
Right.
And somehow I was so blind, staying stuck in my own shame for so long, that I didn't even know that there was an alternative story that was just as true.
Yep.
Right. And I want to be careful because there's still facts. Like we have facts of the situation that go on, right? With whatever
facts are facts.
Anyone listening is like, you know what? My husband, he cheated on me and he lied to me. Yes, those are the facts. Those are the facts. What's the additional story that's been attached to those facts? And is that story serving you?
He did it because I'm fat. He did it because I'm ugly. He did it because I'm not. He did it because he's just the scum of the earth, worst ever. You know, like so. And you know, are those things true or not or whatever? But to stop and say, are these working for me to live in this belief system and in this paradigm? Is it really going to help me get what I want?
Yeah. Yeah. I had this kind of cool experience happen just not too long ago, where there's been this like pattern with this wife that's saying to her husband, you don't see me, you don't value me, you've never stood up for me, you never protected me, you never like stood up for me in front of like other people, in front of your family or my family or whatever else. And then that's been like the story of their whole marriage. And she woke up just recently, a few weeks ago, she woke up in the middle of the night and was like, hey, I just saw something so different. She woke her husband up and she said, I just realized I just played the last 2 hours in my brain of all the times when you were standing up for me or fighting for me or protecting me, and I never even saw it before.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, I'm so grateful that you did that. And now what does she see?
Yeah.
She sees the part of her husband who has been trying to fight for her and protect her, instead of all the ways that she felt like he was disappearing or not protecting her.
Well, and if we were to take it a step further, she might see that. And when she sees that, she'll then show up in appreciation and gratitude and wanting to connect versus protection, disconnecting, pushing away. Right.
Yeah.
And so it's when we shift our perspective, we change our belief systems and our paradigms, but there's consequences to that, in that then we show up differently. We respond differently in this world. And when we show up differently, then we actually get different outcomes in our life. I think of some people that I've worked with just massive amounts of trauma, and I look at their childhood and I'm like, man, God just kind of took a shit on you. Like,
Yeah.
this sucks. Like, why? It's one thing after another.
Yeah. Heavy
And
stuff.
heavy, horrible stuff. And they're like resilient. And they're like, yeah. And I ended up with this addiction. I got divorced twice, but now like life is good. And I've learned so much, and God, my relationship with God is so good now, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm looking at them like, you know, and then I think of the people who haven't had nearly the amount of trauma, who are, you know, just shutting their life down and quitting and sitting on the sidelines, and it's all their point of view. And Tyler, I believe when we look at perspective, trauma is real. People have their trauma, but it comes down to one distinction. And it really is in Carol Dweck's book, Mindset. It's growth mindset versus fixed mindset. Now, if I have a growth mindset, then I'm forever open to the possibility of what God's doing in my life. I'm living a life of surrender and watching with curiosity what's happening. So when something does happen to me, I have a much more kind of Zen outlook on it, a radical acceptance outlook of, okay, what am I to learn here?
Like,
How can I?
what could possibly be going on here?
Yeah, and you brought this up with me with COVID, when COVID went nuts and all this stuff, and I was just like, this is interesting and this is awesome. Like, there's a lot to learn here. There's a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, and I was freaking out.
Yeah, you know, so, and that's like an example of kind of stepping back and saying, okay, growth mindset. How can I get closer to God and gain some growth from this experience? Fixed mindset sets you up to be the victim to life and to be the victim to others, right?
Yeah. I remember this brings to mind something that I watched you teach one time in a setting. I think it was one of our retreats. We were talking about the life experiences that we've had and the wounds that we've experienced. And you changed some language of a statement. You said it starts with, and this is what I think this is actually really a good exercise for anyone who's trying to change mindset to suffer less. It starts with the question, what is God doing to me? Mm-hmm. And then you changed it and you said, but eventually it might change to what is God doing for me? And then you changed it one more time and said, or maybe what is God doing through me?
Yep.
And if you start looking at just that shift in perspective, it's like, here I am. I have had some type of childhood trauma. Think of the pain and suffering that we induce on ourselves and all of the other reenactments we do based off of any one of those three places. What is God doing to me? Oh, poor me. Now I can find evidence of how I'm being dumped on all over the place, everywhere else. What is God doing for me? Oh, maybe I'm something to learn here, something to grow from here. What is God doing through me? Oh, I need these life experiences because I am an instrument.
Yep.
Because I have purpose, I have passion, I have meaning now as a result of the things that I've experienced. The same experiences with three different lenses produce three completely different outcomes in our lives. And this is the hard part that you were saying for that people listening are going like, oh, like, it's not fair though, because so-and-so did this or so-and-so did this. And I hurt so bad. And it's like, yes, all those feelings are valid. And when it comes down to it, this is it, Brannon, you're talking about back to the soccer thing. The only person who was responsible for most of the suffering was you.
All of it, all the suffering. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's hard. That's hard to hear and take ownership for. But if you look at it from a different lens, it is so empowering.
Yep.
It's 100% empowering that you, Brannon, had it at your fingertips at all times, a different way to view that would allow you to have joy and not suffering.
Yeah. You know, it's one of Grandpa Harris's favorite quotes, which is pain is mandatory, but suffering is optional. And the fact of the matter is the suffering comes from me ruminating in those beliefs that are causing me that suffering, right? And the beauty, this is what God gives us, and it's beautiful. And people hate this when they don't want to do it. The beauty is it's what Viktor Frankl says. They can take everything away from me, but they can't take away my power to choose how I feel. Meaning, in any given situation, in any scenario, no matter what happens to me in my life, if I go bankrupt, if my wife leaves me, if whatever bad thing happens, I still have the power to choose how I want to see it and how I want to feel.
Exactly.
I still have it. Right?
Exactly. And we don't even realize that we have that superpower already built into us because we don't pause to become mindful of it, and we'd rather live on the autopilot of whatever the comings and goings are of our everyday life.
Yep. But God, I believe this, Tyler, and this is just my beliefs. I think God's always working through me. And so when things happen in my life, whatever they may be, good or bad, well, why? Well, like, God has a purpose. And so what am I supposed to learn here so that I can actually apply this in some way? And I believe my purpose is to be a champion for truth, to help others find freedom and healing. Yeah. So if that's my purpose, then God's doing something to me for a reason to help me live my purpose, right? Even if it's hard, bad stuff.
Right. And that keeping that attitude is really, really difficult. And it also butts up against something else that seems to be in opposition, but I think it's a dialectic, which is, I can imagine a lot of our listeners hearing that from you, Brannon, going like, yeah, but like, how come I hurt so bad when I am betrayed? Or how come I am so devastated when my boss fired me wrongfully? Or like, and it's like, on one hand, there needs to be room for that humanness to say, yes, those things happened. Yes, I have those emotions. Yes, like it hurts, or yeah, those things weren't fair. Like whatever, the acknowledgement of the life itself, of the experience itself, is not a bad thing. The ability to feel those feelings is a human thing. What we're talking about is, in addition to those things, eventually we have to come to our own selves and say, and what do I want to do about it?
Tyler, what if we shifted our perspective, like everybody? What if everybody could shift their perspective to those feelings that you're talking about? Pain, maybe pain is God's attempt to get to you, versus pain is punishment. Pain is that life's not working out the way that it should. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like there is absolutely purpose in all of the pain. And so we're not saying don't have pain. We're not saying if I were to go bankrupt or my wife were to leave me that, ouch, I wouldn't grieve. That grief would be real for me. But then I could turn it back to that perspective of, what is God doing through me? Right.
Yeah.
So
and I wonder we could even take, let's just take what you just said, Brannon, and use an example, because I think it could even turn out differently for each person and still apply to what you were saying. So this pain is there. This is God trying to reach me. That's what you said. And now we've say 3 people who have the exact same situation happen, where they just find out that they've been cheated on. Right. And then they go to work on things. And one person with that perspective ends up working themselves to a place of saying, oh, God's trying to teach me how to set boundaries and stick up for myself and have self-respect. So I'm going to probably end up needing to get divorced because I don't see my partner wanting to work on this anymore, and I don't want to be burned anymore. And the next person goes, but God's working through me differently. And I'm actually here to learn patience and to learn temperance, and I actually think I need to stay a little bit longer because this is where God wants me.
Good.
And, right. And maybe the third person comes up with a different version of that. That's
Good.
Like, you know what, actually, like, God wants me to be the landing space right now for this person. And I may or may not stay long-term, but I'm okay with that because I'm confident in knowing that this is what I'm going to learn as I go. Right. Yeah. In those cases, each person could still see it so differently, but still all of them would actually suffer less and grow more, just with that one shift in perspective that you're talking about.
Right. And you make a really good point that they might respond and do something all different, right? But it's all internal. It's coming to that place of acceptance of, okay, God's telling me to stay, God's telling me to go, but I'm accepting this as God's will versus resisting and fighting against it in my perspective.
Yeah.
I have a new hero, Tyler, and I'm serious about this. I just saw him yesterday. So our cousin's son, Jackson, 17 years old, gets in an accident and is paralyzed. And I've read some of the stuff that he wrote, a talk that he wrote for church. And yesterday he was walking around. I don't know if you knew that.
I did not know that. Holy cow.
Yeah. I mean, he was up on his feet. He was
Way
walking
to go,
around.
Jackson.
Yeah. But you know what? I heard things from him before he started walking around, which was, and even his perspective yesterday was, I'm working my butt off to get better. And I also need to realize that this might be as good as it gets.
Wow.
He's a 17-year-old who can really barely walk. But his attitude and his perspective is, I accept God's will. I accept what is. And I look at a guy like that and I could see it going either direction, right? We can take our life experiences, our trauma, our bad stuff, and he could use that to give him every excuse in the book to play small in life, to be pissed at God, to wallow, to like all those. He has all the reasons to. No 17-year-old should be paralyzed.
Yeah.
And he's saying like, no, I'm going to accept what God's will is here.
I'm going to do my best, but I'm going to be okay with whatever comes of it. Something will come from it.
And that's ultimately what we're saying, Tyler, is these perspectives. Sometimes it seems so impossible to see the other side of things.
Yeah.
Is like, I can't see the young woman. I only see the old woman. But then when you see, when you open yourself up to really look in, and it's like, oh, when God gave me that abusive father, when God gave me that drug addict mother, when God gave me that experience of sexual abuse as a child, whatever it might be, I don't understand that. That doesn't make sense. But maybe there's another way to look at it.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's like the tool to learn from this whole discussion we've had here, Brannon, is that whenever we run into a situation where we're finding that there's an outcome we don't like, one of the first places we can stop and pause is to say, am I looking at this in an accurate perspective, or is there another way to see this? And almost always, you could probably find 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 other ways of seeing it. And the simple act of just looking for those other ways already starts to free you up to then
That's a good point.
Saying, okay, now my perspective that felt so automatic is still just a choice.
Yep.
Because there is the possibility of seeing it a number of different ways too. And I could choose any of those as well.
Yep.
And then I can play each one of those out to the end and figure out which outcome suits me the best.
I hate to tell people, but if you're sitting in a lot of resentment toward your spouse right now, you are responsible for your own suffering. You might want to look at how you're getting stuck in your perspectives a little bit. And that can be hard to hear.
Yeah.
It's interesting, Tyler, Byron Katie. And Byron Katie has laid out a simple process to challenge your perspective and your paradigms and your beliefs. And it's a little simple process called The Work that Byron Katie does in a book called Loving What Is. And we did it in a group, and I'd say 2/3 of the group just loved it. They're like, yeah, like I can change the way I see this and respond differently and have different feelings. And the other third of the group was like, I hate this. This is so like, no, doesn't apply to things.
Your odds are way better than mine, Brandon. I'd say it's probably reversed for me. So you're doing something right there. because most of the vast majority, I'd say probably 20% said, oh man, this is a great tool. And about 80% said, I hate this.
Well, not only did they hate like what she was saying, they almost didn't like her at all. It was just like, ugh. And I just kind of sat back and watched.
Yeah.
But it was interesting because the hardest things are the ones that have a really hard time with Byron Katie. When we're talking about rape, when we're talking about a child who dies, when we're
Yes.
talking about
Hard.
betrayal, when we're talking about those type of things, I don't want to be responsible for my own acceptance of those things, my own grief, my own process of shifting the way that I feel about those things. I want to blame God. I want to blame my spouse. Because I'm in so much pain.
Yeah. Well, it almost makes your stomach turn because we hear that word responsibility and we think responsibility, like it was my fault that those things happened to me. No, that's not what we're saying.
No,
That's not what's being said, but it feels that way when what we're saying is every one of us is responsible for the way we choose to see things and the actions we take accordingly, regardless of what happened to us that wasn't right or whatever happened, right?
You're responsible for your own suffering.
Yeah.
Not for your pain. If someone can hit you from behind in a car accident, ouch. You're then responsible for your emotional, spiritual suffering or your process of acceptance and
freedom.
Yeah, freedom. So this has been a fun conversation, Tyler. I appreciate you talking this through.
Yeah, you bet. It would be interesting to hear what people think or feel at the end of this episode. I'm sure that there's a wide range of emotion and thought and question going on.
Yeah. So I appreciate you guys listening. If you like hate Byron Katie, then you probably didn't like this episode. But what I think what we're talking about, Tyler, is we hope that if you are suffering, that if the suffering is great enough, that you're, in a really deep state of depression, maybe feeling some suicidal thoughts, or just feeling hopeless in your relationship and stuck. Our goal, Tyler, what's our goal?
We just want to unburden and free.
Yeah.
We want people living in their full, best, wholehearted lives possible.
Yeah. It's not to anger any of you, or it's really to just try to open you up a little bit to saying, what power do I have inside of me to actually shift some of these things?
Yeah. Thank you, every one of you. Thank you for listening. You make me and Brannon have an awesome job because we get to do what we love. And if you do have feedback or you'd like to come on and share anything, go to realtalkrecovery.com and you can sign up to be a guest on the show.
Or go to Tyler's Wandering Therapist and leave some comments. I love the comments.
Or Brannon's stuff too, right?
Yeah, go to the Brannon Patrick Show and leave a review. So. All right, we'll see you guys.